Polanski, given his massive body of work with such a range of work, why is this perhaps his most famous and most talked about? I think it is because Rosemary's Baby does somehow plug into that nostalgia. I feel like there's a way in which New York City and then that New York apartment in this movie, I think it somehow distills. It's like, I think it's the same reason why Mad Men was so popular.
Yes.
Right? Because it gave you, suddenly you had not just 1960s, because you could have had it set in the burbs for all of its X number of seasons, but it was very much set in New York City, and it was very much set in that, that aesthetic of New York City, Mad Men, right? And I think there is something about that is a huge nostalgia trap.
Totally.
And we could sort of, and even in this film, I was looking at her hair and her clothing and that gorgeous Scandinavian furniture everywhere, which became popular only at that time. Until then, it was mostly much more, and that's the apartment that they inherit in a way, right? When they first look at the apartment, it's still filled with the old lady's stuff, and it's all these massive, like these huge cupboards and very overstuffed furniture and just too much shit everywhere. And then they come in and they create light, which of course they don't, she doesn't realize is actually just, she's opening up the space to let Satan in.
Right. Yes.
Basically. Like Satan has too much stuff to work through in the old apartment. It's too cluttered for him. Let me open it up. But so I think there is this something about that era and that aesthetic that's a huge nostalgia trap. And I think that's one reason why, like, listen to me going on about the Dakota. I mean, honestly, you could get me talking about the Dakota for hours on end because I want that apartment.
And they get it. Like they built the set. I mean, they took Lauren Bacall's apartment, and the Hollywood architects and designers basically just copied it and built it in Hollywood, but recreated everything about it,
including the ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of incredible. I saw this interview. It wasn't an interview. It was like I guess one of those comedians in cars getting coffee with Jerry Seinfeld talking to Larry David, right? And they're talking about like the science of creating sitcoms, and Jerry Seinfeld says, well, we created the good space, apartments and diners on Seinfeld that people wanted to spend time in, just like visually looking at, like that's it. And then we populate it with certain characters that are part of that space too. But that's totally the Dakota in Rosemary's Baby. It's even though that's the kind of the contradiction and the challenge this movie lays out for you, is because you desire that bourgeois space and you want to be there, like making that apartment with her, even though you sort of know the whole time that something is wrong here. Yeah, you could die, right?
Or be impregnated by Satan himself. Yes, I mean, I love the comedians getting coffee in cars or cars, whatever.
Whatever
I love
the fuck that show is.
I think it's fucking brilliant. Every episode is a goddamn gem because you really learn so much about comedy and also about timing and storytelling. It's a fantastic series.
And Seinfeld has kind of a ruthless, emotionless attitude about things.
He is ruthless about comedy, which I've always appreciated. There's this long article about how I think it took him like a year to perfect a bit. And he just, it's fantastic. But the thing about the Seinfeld apartment, right? Yeah, absolutely. You create this, and it's a much smaller space than Rosemary's Baby. And but what you have are those little details, like that bicycle in Jerry's apartment.
Yes,
the longest time it was on the wall, and that is quintessential New York. It's also quintessential Chicago in a way. You hang your bicycle on the wall because there's no other space, and you sure as hell don't want to leave it out of the street, right? So that's quintessential in New York. And then you get Friends, which is much more unrealistic.
Central Perk, the coffee house.
Central Perk is the coffee house. By then, coffee house. It's so interesting because in Seinfeld, the coffee house culture has not yet started up.
It's diners.
Remember? Yeah, it's diners. And you have at one point, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Elaine says, hey, so there's this place, a coffee house. Do you want to go hang out there? And Jerry says, what do? You drink coffee and you sit there. And he's like, what? And it's a peculiar thing for them, this idea that you just go somewhere and just drink coffee. And then you get, first later in the 90s, you get Friends. And that is, as you put it, Central Perk is the center of
And the 80s had Cheers. And when I think of
Cheers in the bars,
I never watched Cheers, but the space of Cheers is so familiar to me as like like being younger, you know, and like that bar always being on people's television sets. It's like it's in a weird way. It's like you almost like hang out in that place, and it is
they do.
It is
it's their home away from home.
Yeah. And like that, and even though I never watched the show really, I caught pieces of it now and then. It felt like that bar was a real place I could go. You know, it felt like there's a weird thing going on there with like a projected image that's so warm, like so warm and real and inviting. I mean, most of my evenings when I'm done with everything and I just want to like decompress before I go to bed, I basically just want to watch like spaces that I've been in before in Hollywood movies and TV shows. Yes, and that's like, there's something profound and weird about that. That's a 20th century baby.